You know that feeling when you spend a few bucks on a knockoff soldering kit, only to have the iron die the first time you try to pull a stubborn chip off a board? I've been there, and the disappointment that follows makes you wonder if there's any smart option out there at all. That hesitation is what drove me to actually sit down with a proper rework station before I hit record, because I didn't want to repeat the same mistake on a larger scale. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. The Hakko FM206 STA is marketed as a 3-port rework station that bundles a soldering iron, a parallel remover, and a hot air tool into one chassis. At first glance, it sounds like the kind of all-in-one solution that could replace a cluttered bench of separate gadgets. The real question, though, is whether that convenience translates into day-to-day reliability when you're actually trying to fix a busted Arduino, replace a surface mount capacitor, or rescue a broken USB-C port. Setting it up is straightforward. You plug the unit into a standard 120V outlet, flip the main power switch, and the 3 tool handles click into place on the front panel. The station has a single temperature control knob that adjusts the heat for all 3 attachments simultaneously. For a first-time user, that simplicity is a win. There's no need to wrestle with separate power supplies or calibrate each tool individually. I spent about 10 minutes getting the soldering iron tip clean, the parallel remover tip aligned, and the hot air nozzle attached, and the station was ready to go. In practice, the biggest strength I've noticed is the consistency of heat across the 3 tools. When I was desoldering a tiny 0805 resistor with the hot air nozzle, the temperature held steady enough that the solder melted uniformly, preventing the pad from lifting. Switching over to the parallel remover for a larger component, the same temperature setting gave enough heat to release the lead without scorching the surrounding board. That kind of predictability saves you from the guesswork you usually face when you juggle a cheap soldering iron with a separate hot air gun that each have their own quirks. The station also shines in space-saving terms. My workbench is a narrow 2-foot table, and the FM206 ST takes up barely more room than a single tool. The 3 ports are arranged on a compact front panel, so you can grab the handle you need without hunting around. For anyone who runs a small hobby shop or a cramped student desk, that footprint can be the difference between a tidy setup and a tangled mess of cords and adapters. However, the design does come with trade-offs you should be aware of before you click Add to Cart. Because the temperature knob is shared, you can't dial in a high heat for the hot air tool while keeping the soldering iron at a lower setting. The whole station follows one set point. If you frequently need a low-temperature soldering tip for delicate components and a high-temperature blast for larger chips, you'll find yourself constantly adjusting the knob and waiting for the station to settle. It's not a deal-breaker for occasional repairs, but for a workflow that demands simultaneous, divergent temperatures, it becomes a bottleneck. Another practical limitation is the power output. The station is built for hobbyist-level work, meaning the hot air flow is modest compared to a dedicated rework oven or a high-end hot air gun. When I tried to remove a stubborn BGA package, the airflow simply wasn't enough to heat the entire array quickly. I had to let the nozzle sit a few seconds longer, which can risk overheating nearby components. For most through-hole and small surface mount jobs, the airflow is adequate, but if you regularly tackle larger BGAs or need rapid reflow, you'll probably want a more robust hot air solution. Who should consider buying the Hakko FM206 STA? If you're a hobbyist who builds or repairs Arduino-style projects, a maker who tinkers with IoT boards, or a student learning electronics repair, this station gives you the 3 core tools you'll need without splurging on separate pieces of equipment. The integrated design also means you only have to learn one temperature control system, which flattens the learning curve. Likewise, small repair shops that focus on smartphones, tablets, or low-volume consumer electronics will find the station a tidy, cost-effective addition to their bench. On the flip side, if you're a professional technician who services large-scale manufacturing lines, or if you regularly work with high-power components like power MOSFETs, automotive ECUs, or industrial control boards, you'll likely run into the temperature-sharing limitation and the modest hot air flow. In those scenarios, investing in dedicated, high-output tools each with its own precise control makes more sense, even if the initial outlay is higher. One hidden advantage that isn't advertised outright is the ease of swapping tools mid-project. Because each handle plugs into the same port, you can start a solder joint, then immediately switch to the parallel remover without putting down a separate device. I found that particularly useful when I was reworking a board that had a mixed bag of components, a tiny SMD capacitor next to a larger connector. The quick,